I want to thank all of you for this opportunity to address one of the most compelling challenges our generation faces, achieving a long-term, fiscally sustainable budget and fiscal outlook. In 2010, as Matt has said, I delivered a speech, also hosted by Third Way, where I made the case for a big and balanced deal to put our nation back on a fiscally sustainable path. Nearly 4 years later, we have still not accomplished that goal. Instead, we've gone from one fiscal crisis to another, kicking the can down the road. Our economy continues to be plagued by uncertainty, and America's position as the world's leading power has from time to time been called into question. In November 2011, I attended a dinner hosted by Senator Mark Warner. Mark Warner, as you know, was the leader of the Gang of Six in the United States Senate. There were a number of other Democrats, Republicans, business leaders, and economists to talk about the debt crisis facing our nation. During the discussion, Indra Nooyi, the CEO of PepsiCo, made a clear and compelling point that it was time for America to get its swagger back, its self-confidence, its belief in itself. She was right then, and she is right today. We've seen the first downgrade of our nation's credit rating in history, and a government shutdown, and Americans are wondering whether we've lost our sense. We've lost the sense of our swagger. After all, if we can't address our own fiscal situation, how can we solve the other complex challenges we have to face, both here and around the world? If we cannot fix our long-term outlook, then our economic competitiveness, our national security, and our role as a global leader will, in my view, be diminished. America is the best and strongest nation in the world, and we can continue to be. Indeed, the world needs us to continue. But we have to get serious about the problems we're facing and willing to make the hard choices necessary. Over the past 4 years, we've failed to make those hard choices. The debt we face today is the result of a disastrous 2001 and 2003 Bush tax cuts and the Great Recession turning surpluses into record debt. But instead of focusing on economic growth in the short term, which we need to do, and ensuring fiscal sustainability over the long term, which we must do, the exact opposite has happened. Critical investments that would grow our economy have been slashed, and the root problems of our future budget deficits have gone, for the most part, unaddressed. If we're going to restore America's position of strength, we have to tackle both of these problems. We must invest in a growing economy and put our nation on a fiscally sustainable path. We can do it, and we must do it. However, there are some who believe that because we are no longer facing a crisis, and I put that in quotes, like a government shutdown or a debt limit, we can stop working, therefore, to restore fiscal sustainability. My purpose here today is to argue exactly the opposite. It's at this moment, when we don't have a crisis breathing down our necks, that we have the best chance to lay the groundwork for the hard decisions we will need to make. If we don't make those decisions, it's going to be the most vulnerable America and most vulnerable Americans who pay the price. Bob Greenstein, head of the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, testified before the Senate Budget Committee last month, warning what will happen if the pressure on our budget is allowed to continue building. He noted that, and I quote him, "The nation can ill afford to neglect funding for Pell Grants, elementary and secondary education, public health, environmental protection, and basic scientific research, as will occur if the funding levels required under sequestration remain in effect." He went on to say, "Failure to make these basic investments will slow long-term economic growth and hence make our long-term fiscal problems greater and likely increase poverty and hardship and reduce opportunity. What a clarion call that is to conservatives and liberals to address this issue. Congress will have a number of opportunities this year to make progress toward our goal of long-term fiscal sustainability. And we should not and we cannot afford to miss those opportunities, as we have missed them over the past 4 years. Now, before discussing what those opportunities are, I believe it's useful first to discuss what's happened to get us where we are. If the past is prologue, and we do not want to repeat a bad past, we need to know what that past is. And that's why I feel so strongly that the future of our nation depends on our willingness to take action. Since my speech in 2010, we saw a bipartisan commission led by Bowles and Simpson and Rivlin and Domenici call for a balanced approach to deficit reduction, combining revenues and spending reforms. Unfortunately, the framework put forward by the Bowles-Simpson Commission was rejected, with its House Republican members all voting to reject it. After the near government shutdown in April 2011, a default crisis precipitated by the breakdown of talks between President Obama and Speaker Boehner led to the Budget Control Act and the Super Committee, which had a mandate to achieve a big deal and a strong disincentive for failure. Yet the Super Committee failed. And as a consequence, a countdown to sequester began. In January 2013, Vice President Biden and Leader McConnell compromised to avert the so-called fiscal cliff, but fell far, far short of a grand bargain. With a 16-day government shutdown and another near default of our debt last October, it became even clearer that the Tea Party-dominated Republicans of the 113th Congress had come no closer to accepting the difficult choices that must be made in order to reach a grand bargain. After the government had reopened, Senator Patty Murray and Representative Ryan reached agreement on a top-line budget figure for this fiscal year and the one that we are now budgeting for, 2015. And in February, Congress voted to ensure that America would pay its bills through March of 2015. I believe, however, that we missed an opportunity with the Murray-Ryan budget, which is why I voted against the budget, but obviously voted for the omnibus, which was the stage was set for by that budget. That budget not only failed to address long-term fiscal sustainability, it also failed to take advantage of a moment when Congress had an opening to show the American people that their government can provide and produce solutions to our most pressing challenges, to get the swagger back, if you will. It was exactly the kind of opportunity we need to be ready for next time, which may be in the short time. And there will be, of course, a next time. So why is it so important to be ready for serious action when the next opportunity arises? A quick look at the numbers show why we can't wait. Without action, we will be a nation that can't invest in its own people. That's happened now, and will get worse. Our budget for next year is $3.8 trillion, but only $1 trillion of that, or a little over a quarter of that budget, is subject to the annual appropriation process. Largely, that is our investment budget. 70% of our budget is tied up in interest payments on our debt and other mandatory spending, including, of course, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, the Farm Bill, Veterans Health, and other programs. These are all very important programs. This pressure has been growing over time. According to a Third Way report last July, and again I quote, in the mid-1960s, the federal government spent $3 on public investment for every $1 it spent on the major entitlement programs. Goes on to say, by 2012, the ratio was reversed, and the ratio will be 5 to 1 in 2022. we are disinvesting in the growth of America. We should be concerned about this trend for two reasons. First, demographic changes make it mathematically inevitable that a higher share of the budget will be devoted to mandatory spending. Last year, Social Security's trustee report said and revealed how our population is changing. In 1964, there were 4 workers for every beneficiary. Today, there are 2.8, and in 2064, it will drop to 2 if nothing is done. The pressure on these demographic trends demand reforms that ask those who can afford to do so to contribute more to accomplishing the long-term sustainability that is essential to America's continued success and growth and leadership. And secondly, rising interest rates as the economy recovers will lead the cost of servicing our debt to more than double as a share of our economy. In other words, our children would be paying for things they cannot and will not use. Today, interest payments on our debt stand at 1.4% of GDP. But by 2024, that figure is expected to reach 3% of GDP. That's more than we spend each year on research and development, infrastructure, and education. In fact, more than all domestic discretionary spending combined. Every dollar we spend on interest is a dollar we can't spend on Head Start, nutrition assistance, job training, infrastructure, innovation, support for public schools and early education, and other investments that help more of our people make it in America. Make it in America ought to be our objective for every American. And those investments are already being crowded out. If interest payments are allowed to strangle the discretionary side of our budget, both Democrats and Republicans will watch as federal programs they see as critical being undermined. For Democrats, we have to ensure that our middle class and those working hard to enter our middle class don't bear the burden of an increasingly strained budget. A report released by the Center for American Progress in December 2012 highlights the consequences of ignoring our long-term fiscal outlook. And again, I quote from their report, "Key national priorities such as strengthening the middle class, reducing poverty, and building a world-class infrastructure will remain unaddressed." An unacceptable consequence. Income inequality will continue to rise, they go on to say, and America's ability to govern its fiscal affairs will continue to fall. And sooner or later, we will find ourselves struggling through another economic crisis. The Center for American Progress report was absolutely correct in my view. Our current outlook leaves little room for America to lead the global economy for the next generation, where the keys to success will be innovation, a skilled workforce, and the efficient movement of goods and services across oceans and continents. And it's not a recipe for growing and strengthening our middle class either. Some progress, of course, has been made. The deficit has been cut in half since 2009 from 9.2% of GDP to 4.1%. Much of the $3 million in savings already achieved have come from higher revenues due to the recovering economy, from the Budget Control Act, caps and sequester, from the Fiscal Cliff Agreement, and from the slower pace of health care spending, resulting from the Affordable Care Act, which is now projected to reduce the deficit by $402 billion over the next decade and about $1 trillion in the decade to follow. To that extent, the Affordable Care Act has made a significant contribution to our fiscal sustainability. However, by placing so much emphasis on the discretionary side of the budget, this approach achieved short-term savings while foregoing long-term investments. Not only have we avoided seriously fixing our long-term outlook, we undercut our ability to grow and add to our economy. make it all the more difficult to ensure fiscal sustainability. In my opinion, a big deal, a comprehensive agreement, is the best way for Congress to achieve a fiscally sustainable outlook that can inject certainty into our economy and help us invest in competitiveness, job growth, and opportunity. In fact, it may be the only way to do so. If we can, in a bipartisan way, reach a comprehensive agreement, it would be, in my view, the single most effective action we could take to stimulate our economy, give confidence to markets, and ensure that we have the resources to invest in our people. Now, certain reforms that wouldn't pass on their own could be accepted as part of a broader package where everyone shares the political risks. History teaches us that is the course we should follow, and which is why I just said it may be the only way to get to a comprehensive agreement and fiscal sustainability. But short of reaching a big deal, we can still leverage opportunities before us to make progress toward the goal that proponents of such a deal have long sought. If we're going to show the world that America is serious about tackling our problems head-on, Congress will have several opportunities this year to work in a bipartisan way to fix structural problems in our budget. One place to start could be on comprehensive immigration reform. When scoring the Senate's bipartisan bill last year, the Congressional Budget Office found that fixing our nation's broken immigration system will save $158 billion in the first 10 years and $685 billion in the decade to follow. So although that may not seem to be a budget action, it very definitely is. Those savings are substantial structural savings to address our budget shortfall, as well as a big answer to our growing demographic shortfall. The Senate, of course, has already acted, and the House ought to do the same this year, in the near term. We also need to address a number of expiring and expired tax provisions. Comprehensive tax reform is the right approach, even though it may be more difficult. But if we can use the tax extenders process to promote the benefits of comprehensive reform, including making our long-term outlook more sustainable, it would be an important victory compared to recent history. Failure to offset the cost of these provisions could add over $900 billion to deficits over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. That's larger than the remaining sequester cuts. The proposal introduced by Ways and Means Chairman David Camp earlier this month was, in my opinion, an important conversation starter, a positive effort, albeit a partisan effort. Chairman Camp's effort is an honest one that clearly delineates the trade-offs that will be required. The Camp proposal, however, fails to produce the revenue we need to achieve long-term fiscal sustainability. I encourage committee Democrats and Republicans to redouble their efforts to produce bipartisan reforms that will provide greater certainty to our private sector, boost our economic competitiveness, and yes, contribute to deficit reduction. Later this year, Congress will also have to reauthorize our surface transportation program and address the massive shortfall in the Highway Trust Fund. Infrastructure makes our economy more competitive and helps more businesses make it in America so they can move their product to markets at home and also abroad. And investing in infrastructure in a fiscally sustainable way by fixing the trust fund shortfall and providing dedicated revenue for additional investments is a win-win proposition for long-term success. My colleague, Representative John Delaney, and other members have some very interesting proposals to deal with both of these objectives. Furthermore, in the next calendar year, Congress will have to address the need to replace the sequester beyond the Murray-Ryan deal, which, although touted as a 2-year deal, we are currently, 3 months later, dealing with its consequences and will adopt a budget and or appropriations bills this year, which will be the final of the Ryan-Murray deal. Returning to the sequester pass in 2016 would impose serious harm not only to well-being of the most vulnerable Americans, but to many other critical priorities as well, including national security, our defense. Republicans have been quick to decry savings proposed by the Pentagon while failing to recognize they are the direct result of the sequester they themselves supported. Democrats and Republicans agree that we need to maintain a robust national defense. But those who voted for the defense sequester cannot simply disown it without offering a productive alternative. And it cannot be done at the expense of domestic spending. The groundwork for replacing the sequester should be laid before the Murray-Ryan deal expires, which is to say, soon. Done so by achieving savings where possible and identifying areas where Democrats and Republicans can come to an agreement. These are just a few exemplary opportunities we can use to advance the goal of sustainability and make the argument for why this continued effort will better position America for the future, both at home and abroad. In a speech to the Chamber of Commerce in 2010, Dave Cote, CEO of Honeywell, and at the time a member of the Bowles-Simpson Commission, issued this stern warning about our nation's finances. And I quote, "We have come together, Democrats and Republicans, old and young, business and labor. Polemics," he said, "have to be put aside." He went on to say, "I've often said democracies seem uniquely suited to putting up the traffic light after the fourth accident. We've already seen the first accident." He concluded, "It is time to act." He was right. 4 years have passed, and act we must. Moving forward, we ought to embrace and maximize our chances to set our fiscal house back in order and restore not only America's strength, but its swagger. If we can do that, we will see that America indeed has its swagger back. Other nations are looking to the United States to lead. And if we cannot, someone else will. We owe it to our successor generations to summons the political courage, the wisdom, the common sense, and a deep sense of personal responsibility to show that we are worthy of our offices, we who are members of the Congress of the United States and the United States Senate, and worthy of the trust of our fellow citizens. If we do so, if we meet our responsibilities and exercise that wisdom and common sense, we will regain the faith of the American people, and the government will gain the people's respect. They will know with confidence that our nation will continue to lead and to serve its people, and they will experience renewed optimism that America's best days are still ahead. Thank you very much.